So a little God moment. I mean, we strive to be really seamless and slick in worship, but just to give you an insight that it's not always us. Sometimes God just happens in this room. Jeff was doing his children's moment. He's starting to quote this. I happened to be just testing my connection and flipping to my first slide when David Herndon's son sees this, is listening to Jeff, and they throw it up there to support what Jeff is saying. I'd like to say we were that slick, but I think God just kind of moved all the chess pieces around to make it work. It was kind of a neat moment. I love this text, and sometimes when you hear a text that you've heard for decades throughout your life, and then you hear it, something new in it. Today what I heard was what is not remembered, which is why is Thomas not there the first time? If Thomas comes to me and says, I didn't get to see this or that, how often would my first response, well, where were you? Because then my next question is, did you deserve to see it? Or did you just miss out because you were lazy, you missed your alarm, you chose to do something else, you made a choice, there was a consequence? So often that's the way I work. That's the way a lot of us work. That is not remembered in this text, and it's beautiful that it's not remembered in this text because it would get in the way of what is important. And how often do we focus on what's not important, and it prevents us from seeing what is so beautiful in this text. As I prepare for this sermon, one of the things that I sort of mused about for a little bit is how much we reward confidence and punish doubt. We reward confidence and we punish doubt. So several people have put their name forward in the last week or two that they're going to be running for President of the United States in 2016. During a presidential debate, if any of them answer the question by saying, great question, I have no idea the answer, already you can see where this goes, true? Even if they said, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to go research this and get you an answer with the kind of depth and validity to it that you deserve, they would instantly be punished in the spin after the debate. But unless the fact checkers catch it, if they stand up there and tell you with bravado what you want to hear, they'll be rewarded. This text does not work that way. I love it. You know the story, or you've read the story, or you just heard the story as Tracy read it. This is Caravaggio, sort of a Reformation artist. He has a great painting of the Walk to Emmaus. He has this great painting of Thomas' encounter with Jesus. What I love is how the artist portrays what sounds, as I hear it in the Bible, somewhat of a gruesome scene, but he paints it without the gore, instead paints it with the intimacy. If you are able to see it, or if you look closely at this image, you look it up online or in an art book, Thomas's finger is inside Jesus' body. And that's Jesus' hand. There's actually a little nail print on top. That's Jesus' hand holding on to Thomas's hand. It's intimate. I love this portrayal. And of course you have the other two looking over, wanting to see. Thomas misses out. Thomas wants what the others have. Thomas demands his right to see, to experience Jesus Christ just like the other disciples did. And it's incredible how Jesus responds to Thomas. Instead of like I earlier stated, I might have responded to Thomas. Jesus affirms Thomas's doubts by showing up. He appears. He's present. How much is that such a value in our faith-based relationships when we are present, when we show up for each other? Jesus does that and affirms Thomas's demanding to see what the others had seen. And Jesus doesn't stop there. Jesus then, whether it was just like this or not, creates this moment, draws Thomas in, invites Thomas to be intimately present with Jesus, to put his finger into the wounds. And then provides a special blessing for you and I and all the others who don't get this moment, who didn't see Jesus the way the disciples did, and yet we come to believe. radical consequences from what's happened. One of those is death doesn't take Jesus from this world. We love the incarnation. I love the incarnation. We love Christmas. Jesus is born as a baby among us. Then Jesus grows. Jesus walks among us, teaches us, heals us, renews us, reconciles us. All this amazing stuff from the Gospels about Jesus' earthly ministry, the incarnation. And so often, even I think all of us at some point wrestle with this idea that the death on the cross ended the incarnation. This story, this memory from our ancestors of faith assures us that's not what happened. That after the resurrection, Jesus isn't resurrected as a spirit or a ghost. Jesus is resurrected with a physical body that had physical wounds that could be touched. Which then says to us that the power of death that is so impactful on our lives is not the power in God's life. That God has the power over death. Just as God chose to be born into this world, to be incarnate like you and I, God chose when that ended. That ended when Jesus was standing with the disciples later in the Gospels, and Jesus lets them know that it's time, and then Jesus ascends into heaven, ending the incarnation as they knew it. God chose when to end the incarnation. God chose when to begin the incarnation. And even when God endured death, as you and I endure death, Jesus chose that that would not be the final word. That's a radical statement. Full of hope, full of inspiration, full of God's awesome power to heal our lives. It also implies that, like Thomas, Jesus wants us to seek after him, to have that intimate relationship. Through the Gospels, can you think of a time when anyone brought a question to Jesus that Jesus didn't answer? Regardless of how off the wall it was, how off base it was, how from left field it came, is there a question that they bring to Jesus that Jesus says is out of bounds? It happens. It happens when the disciples start to argue on who's going to sit on the left and who's going to sit on the right. And Jesus finally has to tell them, okay, now you're just getting a little prideful. This is not what this is about. Set that question aside because it does not build you up or the community of faith. How many times do we see the other? Like the woman that reaches out from the crowd. She's trying to remain anonymous. She has so much faith in the power of Jesus Christ that she believes that she can remain anonymous and just touch his cloak and she will be healed. And she was healed. And Jesus recognized that someone had touched him, and he wanted to know her. He didn't want her to remain anonymous. He wanted to know her, and he sought her out so they could have a relationship. Zacchaeus climbs a tree because he can't see Jesus because of all the crowd. So he thinks, I'll just climb a tree. At least I can see Jesus. And Jesus reaches out because Jesus wants to know him. The Thomas story is a beautiful affirmation that even through Thomas's doubts, Jesus is building an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. And then the special blessing on those who believe without sin. Let me just jump ahead. Because I think this has radical implications on you and I. I get lost if I try to do this too much. So Thomas is in a community of faith. We don't know what kind of person Thomas was to this extent. I mean, we still have enough information about Thomas to know. Is he just normally a questioner? Was he that kid that always asked so many questions that finally his parents couldn't listen to him anymore? Was he that one adult that in the meeting when everybody else knew, okay, we got it, we're all headed in this direction, and they raised their hand and derailed the conversation? Is that who Thomas is? We don't know. But what we can assume is that Thomas was in a community of faith that encouraged his doubting as a part of his faith journey. When the other disciples see Jesus, they could have said to Thomas, too bad you weren't here, but hush with their questions, because Jesus might go, don't bother Jesus with your questions. We've told you how it is. Hop in line, keep your mouth quiet, and just follow along. They could have said that to Thomas. But apparently, this community of faith that Thomas had been a part of for years as he was traveling with the disciples, watching Jesus' ministry, being a part of Jesus' ministry, was a community that encouraged him in his doubts. So that he had the confidence, this is where confidence is great, he had the confidence to step forward and share those doubts and be affirmed by Jesus and get answers that built him up. That's an amazing experience in the community of faith. It's been a part of our tradition. It's been a part of our tradition as the disciples of Christ. To be one where we want to encourage the individual to read the scriptures for themselves and interpret, what is this saying to you? Where is God's voice in this? We're called to be that kind of community. That's where I think this text has a call, not just on us as individuals. And I hope as an individual, we can read this text and we can identify with Thomas and feel comfortable to bring our doubts and our questions to Jesus Christ and know that we will not be shunned, but that we will be dealt with and will be embraced and will be encouraged. As a community of faith, I think this text calls us to be the kind of community that helps people to do that. That helps people to engage the scriptures, engage our tradition, follow Jesus Christ, and ask these questions that sometimes are difficult and painful. This, back to this. Oops. Where is it? Okay, this is not a God moment in technology. I'm just going to leave this alone now. This is not a comfortable moment. Right? This is not a comfortable moment. This is Thomas asking about identity, as Jeff brought up. This is Thomas asking about experience. And Jesus is embracing these difficult questions in a way that for Thomas could not have been overly comfortable. I can't imagine it was comfortable when Jesus grabbed his hand and said, put your finger here so you know that I'm real. But Thomas's response is, my Lord, my God. That statement of faith that is so inspiring. This week I was invited to go over to Eaton Theological Seminary over in St. Louis. We have a couple of our disciple students that are engaged in getting their Master's of Divinity, and part of that process, at some point, they have to meet with two professors and a local pastor to be examined. They turn in some writings, and then we spend about 2 hours talking to them about the Bible, and about God and church, and what do they believe, and how does this work for them, and their call story. I'm sure for the student, because I've been there, it's nerve-wracking, because if you don't pass, you can't graduate. But on the other side, it is so exciting to me to talk to them about where they've come, in part because what usually is shared is their experience of the community of faith. Both the students that I met with Friday shared about their home church, about the church that they work in here in St. Louis now, and the way in which those communities of faith were encouraging them and inspiring them not just to explore the faith, but to give their entire life to the service. One of them is a 60-year-old widow with teenage children that works a full-time job while going to school full-time. I don't know how it works, but she does it. And it's inspiring, not only that she was awake, but she had this sparkle in her eyes because she was excited about the ministry that God was calling her to and the church that was giving her the opportunity to do that ministry. When we are that kind of faith community, it is amazing to see not only how lives are transformed, but the depth of which they can bring their doubts and learn about Jesus Christ. We've been that community. I think we are that kind of community. And I would like to think that you can each name opportunities that you've had to experience Jesus in that way, either here or somewhere else. Maybe it was when you were baptized and you were about to step into the waters of baptism and you looked out and you saw the people in the pews and how much they loved you, and you were seeing the face of Jesus in their face and they were seeing the face of Jesus in your face, and it was one of those holy moments. child got baptized or when you got married. Those holy moments in life we share as a community of faith. And when we are a community that helps each other to engage those, not just by hopping in line and accepting the answer given to you, but allowing you to step up to the plate and swing the bat yourself. It's amazing. That's when this becomes more than the glory that it could have been and becomes the intimate, faithful moment it was meant to be. We're called to be the body of Christ. Another choice of God was that it was time to end Jesus' incarnation as they had known it, and time for Jesus to ascend into heaven. Jesus sent the Holy Spirit to us to empower us to continue to be that incarnation of God among the world. That we could be the ones to show them the face of Christ. May we take advantage of that opportunity.